Just how significant is it that Apple says they can now pull this off?
Well, I think it's a good innovation form. I think it's also a first step. The service, as it was announced today, is a fairly limited, worst case scenario, good to have as a background technology. But if you've been watching the broader industry landscape, there's lots of things happening with satellite phone connectivity, and other companies, including SpaceX and T-Mobile, just last week or 2 weeks ago, that announced a service that's a substantially more viable service. Companies like Iridium that are working with handset manufacturers, AST Space Mobile, Link, and supposedly Android and Google are coming out with satellite phone connectivity also.
So let's talk about the T-Mobile and SpaceX example. What do they offer that Apple does not?
Well, the fundamental difference here that really matters is the spectrum. In the case of the Apple announcement, they are using dedicated satellite-only spectrum, which means Apple has to put, as they said, specific hardware, antennas and chips to work with that satellite-only hardware spectrum. In the case of what SpaceX is doing with T-Mobile or AST working with Vodafone and AT&T, they're actually using the carrier spectrum. So there's no change that needs to be made to the device itself. All the work will be done by the satellite. In the case of a company like AST, they're building one of the largest satellites, certainly one of the most powerful satellites out there, in order to do the work that the handset can't, because the handset has no modifications made to it.
So if this is a good first step, as you say, what do you imagine the second and third step might be?
Yeah, so clearly this is an opening salvo by Apple. It provides a basic level of service, can probably draw some extra interest in the iPhone 14. But I think given what's happening in the broader landscape, if Apple is serious about this, they would have to look at potentially building a satellite constellation of their own. Perhaps not a surprise that Globalstar does have a filing for over 3,000 satellites to potentially launch. And they'd have to build satellites, unlike the current second-gen or recently ordered third-gen satellites that have a much bigger antenna, much more power, and are optimized for working with that consumer handset.
So let's play this out a little bit. Do you imagine that someday Apple might be interested in building a competitor to Starlink, for example?
I would say not exactly Starlink. Starlink's main purpose is broadband, and that's not Apple's game, at least potentially here in the near term. I think the reason that they partnered with Globalstar, they're probably one of the weaker players in terms of their current revenue and their customer profile within the mobile satellite spectrum industry. What they do have is a very good spectrum position. And if they eventually use the full aspect of that spectrum, there is a potential to offer a higher data rate service, certainly nothing that would compare with a Starlink service. But think of it as a 3G, 4G, maybe even up to a low-level 5G type service in the longer term.